Picture a room smaller than your bathroom. Now fill it with 6 people, 2 goats, a pig, and enough smoke that the air itself is something you have to chew before you breathe it. Add walls made of mud and straw that have been absorbing decades of that smoke. Every meal ever cooked, every animal that has ever lived inside, every person who has ever sweated and wept and died within those 4 feet of packed earth. Add a floor that isn't a floor so much as a suggestion of where the ground has been compressed slightly by repeated human contact. Add a roof that leaks in 4 places when it rains, 3 places when it doesn't, and all 7 places simultaneously when the snow melts. Add a single window, if you can call it that, which is basically a hole in the wall that someone nailed a piece of oiled cloth over, and which lets in approximately the same amount of light as a very tired candle from the year before. That's your house. That's your world. That's where you're going tonight. Not as a historian, not even as a curious visitor. You live there. And tonight, December of 1631, somewhere in the flatlands of the English Midlands where the wind comes off the fens with a personal animosity toward human life, you are going to open the barrel in the corner of that room and discover that something has gone very, very wrong. We're going there tonight. One evening, one family, one hut. Everything you would have smelled, felt, heard, and survived. I make these history stories, and honestly, I have no idea if you're listening to this to sleep, or just because you enjoy hearing about what happens to poor people in cold places when the food stops working. Either way, no judgment. Get comfortable. Pull whatever you have over you. Here we go. Your eyes are already open. That's the thing about sleeping in a hut in the 1630s. You don't really wake up so much as you surface. Because you never fully went under. The cold saw to that. You've been lying still for hours, watching the faint orange pulse of the hearth across the room, trying to decide if the warmth it produces is real, or just something your mind is inventing to make the night more bearable. The fire is mostly ash now. Someone should add wood. Nobody moves. The room is dark in a way that cities don't understand anymore. This isn't the dark of a bedroom with the curtains closed, where the phone charges in the corner and the streetlight leaks under the door. This is the dark of before. The dark of no other light source within 3 miles except the stars. And the stars are gone tonight behind clouds that have been dumping snow since mid-afternoon. You know the shape of the room by feel alone. You've lived here your whole life. The smell is first, as always. It's layered the way old things are layered. The top note is smoke, wood smoke, peat smoke, a little of both. The particular acrid signature of a fire that's been burning in an enclosed space without a proper chimney for so long that the beams overhead have been transformed from wood to something almost geological, black and glistening, centuries of combustion compressed into their grain. When you press your hand against one of those beams in the summer, when the heat opens up the wood, your palm comes away dark. Under the smoke, there's the animals. The 2 goats are penned in the corner behind the wicker hurdle. You can hear one of them moving, a soft shifting of hooves on straw, the small grunt of an animal resettling itself against the cold. They smell like what they are, warm, wet, faintly fermented. The pig is in the adjoining lean-to, technically outside, though the wall between you is thin enough that you can hear its breathing on quiet nights. Slow and thick, that breathing. Like something that has entirely given up on any ambitions beyond simple continuation. The goats are in the house because of heat. Not their heat given to you exactly, though it helps. More that they generate body warmth, And body warmth is warmth, and warmth is the thing standing between everyone in this room and death. And so the goats are inside, and everyone accepts the smell, and nobody thinks about it anymore, because you stop thinking about things when they are simply the condition of your existence. Under the animals, there's the people. 6 of you in this room right now. Your father, asleep by the hearth because he's the oldest, and the hearth is his by right. Your mother beside him, though sleeping with her back to him the way she has for as long as you can remember, her knees drawn up, her body conserving its own heat with the practiced efficiency of someone who has spent 30 winters doing exactly this. Your younger brother, Thomas, 11 years old, who is currently pressed against your back with his face buried between your shoulder blades in a way that would be comical if it weren't quite obviously his primary survival strategy. Your grandmother, who everyone calls Nan, and who is 90% certainty dying and 10% certainty just very old, sleeping in the corner farthest from the door on the only raised platform in the room, which is made of planks and raised approximately 8 inches off the ground, which is enough. Enough to matter when the floor floods. Enough to matter when the cold seeps up through the earth. And then you. Wedged between Thomas and the wall, your hip pressed against the packed earth, your feet tucked into the straw that covers the floor. 6 people, 2 goats, 1 pig, 17 inches a wall away. Smoke, animal, human. That's the smell of home. But tonight there's something else. It comes from the corner by the door, the corner where the barrel lives, and it doesn't smell right. You noticed it yesterday, actually, or you thought you noticed it. The way you sometimes think you hear something in a sleeping house and then convince yourself you imagined it, because the alternative being real, is too inconvenient to accept at midnight. The barrel holds grain, not all the grain. There are sacks under the sleeping platform that Nan guards with the vigilance of a woman who has lived through 3 famines and understands at a cellular level what it means to have something to eat. And there's a smaller crock near the hearth that holds the household flour, the worked stuff, the fine ground rye and barley mixture that your mother turns into the flat, dense loaves that sustain you through the short days. That crock is nearly empty. Has been for 2 weeks. You've been rationing, but the barrel is the reserve, the emergency, the thing you touch only when everything else is gone. It was filled in October after the harvest. Rye, mostly, barley mixed in. Enough, your father said, tapping the lid with the flat of his palm and nodding with the satisfaction of a man who's done his calculations. Enough if everyone's careful. Enough if the winter breaks early. Enough if nothing goes wrong. You knew, when he said it, that he was performing confidence for the family the same way you perform calm for Thomas when there's a noise outside at night. Because you watched the harvest. You helped bring it in. You know what the grain looked like when it went into the barrel. A little damp, maybe. Maybe more than a little. The autumn had been wet. The whole village knew the harvest was thin. The whole village was doing exactly this kind of accounting. Your father sealed the barrel and put it in the corner, and now it's December. You lie still for another minute, feeling Thomas's small warmth against your back, telling yourself you're imagining it. That the smell is just the usual smell, the overlapping smell of everything else in this room. And your nose is playing tricks on you at 3 a.m, because that's what noses do when they've had nothing good to smell for months. Then you breathe in, deliberately, slowly, and there it is, underneath the smoke and the goats and the people and the stale fog of breath from 6 sleeping bodies. something sweet and wrong, something that isn't food anymore, something that has passed through food on its way to something else. You get up. The floor is cold under your feet. Not the kind of cold that surprises you, not the sharp intake of breath cold of stepping on bathroom tile in winter. This cold is the full commitment of frozen earth, and it goes straight through your feet and up your ankles and begins working on your knees before you've taken 3 steps. Your feet are wrapped in rags, strips of rough wool wound around and tied at the ankle, because shoes, real shoes, the kind with soles, are for going outside and Sundays and other formal occasions. Inside you have rags. The rags are not equal to this cold. You cross the room in 8 steps, navigating by the faint orange glow of the hearth, past the shape of your father on the ground, one arm thrown over his face, past the lump of your mother, around the end of the sleeping platform where Nan's breathing is slow, and liquid and wrong in ways you try not to think about. The barrel is in the corner by the door, wooden staves, iron bands, about the height of your hip. Your father made it 12 years ago, or thereabouts, from oak he'd negotiated off the estate cooper in exchange for 2 days of harvest labour. It's a good barrel, technically. Solid. The kind of thing that should last. You put your hands on the lid. The wood is cold and faintly damp under your palms, which is the first problem, because dry wood does not sweat in winter. You lift the lid. The smell hits you like a physical thing, not rot exactly, not the rot of meat or the rot of something dead in the ditch. This is sweeter than that, and stranger, and in some ways worse, because there's still food in this smell. You can still recognize what this used to be. You can still identify the grain under the wrongness, the way you can still see the face in a portrait that's been damaged. It's there. It's just not right anymore. The grain looks fine at first. In the dim orange light, in the dark of 3 in the morning, it looks exactly like grain. You dip your hand in. Your fingers come away wet, not just damp, wet. The grain at the top of the barrel is dry enough, but 6 inches down it's clumping, sticking together, and when you pull out a fistful and hold it near the faint hearth light, you can see the white thread of mould lacing through it, fine as spider silk, running through the kernels in every direction. You close your fist and stand there. Behind you, Thomas snores once, loud and sudden, and then settles back into his even breathing. You open your fist and count what's in your palm. There are about as many bad kernels as good ones. Here's the thing about being a peasant in the 1630s. You know exactly how much food you need to survive. You know it the way modern people know their bank balance, with that constant low-level awareness that runs underneath everything else. Always present, always updating. You do not measure this in coins. You do not measure it in pleasure. You measure it in days. Stand in the dark of your hut and do what you do automatically, what you've been trained to do since you were old enough to understand that winter has a length and food has a quantity, and those 2 numbers have to agree with each other or someone dies. The crock by the hearth, maybe 5 days. If you cut the loaves thinner, if nobody complains. The sacks under the platform, your mother's domain, and you don't know exactly what's in them, but based on how she's been portioning the meals for the past 3 weeks, maybe another 2 weeks, maybe, if you're careful, if you stay inside and don't burn extra calories going out in the cold, if Nan doesn't need more. The barrel, you don't know yet. You don't know how far down the damage goes. Could be just the top. Could be halfway through. Could be all of it. grain absorbs moisture, and moisture brings mould, and mould moves fast in a sealed container, faster than you'd think. Winter in the English Midlands in 1631 does not end until late March at the absolute earliest. Sometimes April. It is the 11th of December. You count on your fingers in the dark, which is something you do because the numbers are too large and too frightening to hold in your head without giving them something physical to attach to. 5 days, 2 weeks, the barrel unknown. Total known food. Roughly 20 days if you're lucky, if you stretch it, if nobody gets sick, if the goats keep producing, if nothing else goes wrong. Total remaining winter, 100 days at minimum. You put the lid back on the barrel, quietly, so as not to wake anyone. Then you stand in the cold for a moment, in the dark, with your feet freezing and your face hot, and your heart doing something specific and unpleasant in your chest that isn't quite panic, but is panic's polite and practical cousin. There's a word for what happens when the food runs out in February and the nearest town is 12 miles away, and the roads are impassable with snow, and the Lord's granary is full, but not for people like you. The word is famine. You've heard stories. Your grandmother has more than stories. She has scars. You stand in the dark and breathe slowly and think. You don't go back to sleep. You sit by the hearth, add wood, quietly, just a stick because wood is also running out, and wait for the cold blue light of December morning to begin pressing through the oiled cloth over the window hole. It comes slowly. It is not a comforting light. It is the light of a sky that has run out of warmth and is simply continuing out of habit. One by one, the others wake. Your father first, because your father always wakes first. He rises in the slow, deliberate way of a man whose body has been asking him to stop doing this for about 15 years, and who has no choice but to continue. He's 44 years old, which sounds young, but his hands look like something carved from rootwood, knobbed, split at the knuckles, with a permanent dark ring of dirt under every nail that no amount of washing has ever fully removed, because the work that puts it there simply renews itself every day. He sees you sitting by the fire and nods, once, the specific nod of a man who knows something is wrong and is deciding how to ask. Barrel, you say. He closes his eyes briefly. Your mother is already up, moving to the crock, already beginning the morning's calculation of bread. She pauses when she hears the word, doesn't turn around, her hands still for a moment over the flour. How bad, your father says. It's not quite a question. I don't know yet. Needs checking in the light. He nods again, gets up. The joints in his knees make a sound that you've grown up hearing and have never gotten used to. Thomas is awake, lying still on the floor, looking at the ceiling with the eyes of a child who has learned to be very quiet when adults use certain tones of voice. He's learned this the way children learn things in small spaces, by proximity and repetition, and the understanding that some conversations are not for him. From the corner, Nan says, "The grain's gone bad." Everyone looks at her. She hasn't opened her eyes. "The barrel," she says. "I could smell it 2 days ago. You should have checked it a week ago." A pause. "We didn't seal it right." Your father starts to say something and then doesn't. He goes to the barrel, lifts the lid. You watch his face in the morning light. Watch the particular stillness that comes over it when he sees what you saw. He puts the lid back very carefully. "Right," he says, and that's all he says. After breakfast, a thin porridge, watered down, enough to fill the space inside you if not the hunger. Your father and you take the barrel outside. The cold is immediate and absolute. Snow from yesterday has settled on the ground about 3 inches deep, covering the yard, the path to the well, the low wall of the vegetable garden that hasn't had anything growing in it since October. The sky's the colour of old pewter, not threatening more snow, not yet, just sitting there, sullen and low, pressing down on everything. The hut looks from outside like what it is, a low oblong shape of mud and straw, the thatch roof bent inward slightly from the weight of old repairs, a thin line of smoke coming from the hole in the peak. There are 4 other huts visible from where you're standing, scattered along the lane that runs through the village, each of them exactly as small, each of them with the same thin smoke. Your nearest neighbour, old Marjorie, is standing in her own yard watching you. She knows about barrels. You don't acknowledge her. Not yet. The barrel in daylight tells a clearer story. You work through it together, you and your father. He scoops grain out with a wooden bowl, and you hold it up to the flat winter light, turning it, sorting with your fingers. The top layer is fine. A hand's depth down it starts. White threads through the kernels, the faint sweetish wrong smell intensifying as you dig deeper. Halfway down, and here your father makes a sound, a quiet exhalation through his nose. Halfway down there's a clump where moisture has gathered and something has grown and the grain has fused together into a solid mass the colour of old cheese. You pull it out. It comes away in a chunk. When you break it apart in your hands, the smell is sharp enough to make your eyes water. Your father crouches down in the snow, his elbows on his knees, looking at the grain in his hands. Right, he says again. That word is doing a lot of work this morning. The bottom quarter of the barrel is probably salvageable. You separate it out carefully. When you're done, the good grain fills about 1/3 of the empty barrel. The bad grain, the truly bad, the clumped and fused and obviously wrong, fills 2 wooden buckets that you set to the side. The middle ground, the kernels that are damp but not obviously ruined, that show the beginnings of mould but not the full flowering of it, that's more complicated. Your father holds up a handful of the questionable grain, looks at it. It might be all right, he says. He doesn't believe it. We could dry it, you say. Spread it by the fire. He looks at you with the expression of a man who's considered this and knows its limits. Fire's too small, and if we spread it near the fire, the animals will get into it. Not all of it. And if even the mould's in it, drying won't take the mould out, just dries the mould. He pauses. Might make people sick. He means ergot, though he doesn't call it that. He doesn't have that word. What he has is memory, his own and borrowed from everyone who told him things, of what happens when you eat grain that's gone wrong in the particular worst way, the shaking, the burning in the hands and feet that people call St. Anthony's fire, because before they understood what caused it, they blamed the saint and prayed to him. The hallucinations, the gangrene in the worst cases, fingers and toes going black and dying. Your village had a case of it 6 years ago. The youngest miller daughter. She was 8. She kept her fingers. Barely. Your father puts the questionable grain in its own pile. 3 piles now. Good. Questionable. Gone. The good pile is not large enough. You don't go back inside immediately, because there's a 4th option that nobody has said out loud yet, and it involves the village, and the village involves other people, and other people are complicated. The village of Marsh End, which is what the place has always been called, though you've never lived anywhere else, and so the name seems as arbitrary as your own, has 62 people in it this winter. You know this because you know everyone, obviously. the way you know the shape of your own hand. You know which families are well provisioned and which ones are tight. You know which households had good harvests and which ones are already watching the walls. You take the path to Marjorie's hut. She's still in her yard, feeding scraps to chickens that look as cold and miserable as everything else in December. She's maybe 60, Marjorie, though she looks 80. She lost her husband to the sweating sickness 4 years ago, and her oldest son to a Lord's War 2 years before that. And what's left of her household is her and her daughter-in-law Agnes and Agnes's 3 children, the youngest of which is not yet 2 years old, and therefore a drain on resources without being a provider of any. "Barrel?" she says, before you've said a word. "Barrel." She clicks her tongue, not unsympathetically. "How much?" "Maybe a quarter good, the rest gone or going." She looks at the sky, the way people look at skies when they're calculating something and don't want you to see them doing it. "Ours went in September," she says. "Not the barrel. The sack's under the floor." Agnes thought the floor was dry. Was it not? The well overflowed in the autumn rains, came up through the earth. She shakes her head. "Lost about a third. We've been short since October." This is not good news, obviously, but it is, in its way, information. You're not alone in this, which doesn't solve the problem but does change its shape. "Thomas Fletcher's stores are fine," Marjorie says, not looking at you. "He said so at church." Thomas Fletcher is the miller. The miller always has stores. The miller takes a portion of every grain that comes through the millstone, which is how mills work and how millers have always profited and why millers have always been looked at sideways by everyone else in the village, with the particular combination of resentment and dependence that comes from needing something you also resent. He won't give it away, you say. No, he'll sell it at winter prices. She says winter prices the way other people say words that can't be printed. Winter prices. You know what that means. Grain that costs 6p a bushel in October will cost twice that in January and 3 times in February, at the exact point when you need it most and have the least money and leverage. The miller knows this, knows you know it, is not apologetic about it. The market hasn't been invented yet that fixes this problem. The part of your brain that understands fairness has an opinion about it. The rest of you just nods and moves on because fairness is not a winter survival strategy. "What about the Lord's granary?" you ask. Marjorie looks at you. The look is the answer, but she says it anyway. "Have you gone mad?" Let me explain what that look means, because this is the part of peasant life that requires some context. The lord of the manor, your lord, Sir Edward Hulworth, who you have seen perhaps 4 times in your life, always from a distance, always from below, owns most of the land in this area. Your family holds a small strip holding, about 20 acres spread across the 3 great fields of the village. You farm it, technically. You pay rent for it in labour. So many days per week working the Lord's own domain land, his home farm, plus a portion of whatever you grow, plus the tithe to the church, plus various fees that have accumulated over generations like barnacles on a boat, some of which have actual names. The Heriot is the one where, when your father dies, the Lord gets to take your best animal as a death tax, as if losing your father wasn't enough, and some of which are just things that happen because they've always happened. When you add it up, and your father has added it up, in his careful way, drawing figures in the dirt with a stick on quiet evenings, when you add it all up, roughly 1/3 of everything you produce leaves the holding before your family eats a bite. The Lord's granary is a stone building near the manor house, which is 1.5 miles up the lane. It is full. It is always full, because the Lord takes his portion first and keeps it. You have walked past it. You have helped carry grain to it on harvest days. You know exactly what's in there, but it is not your grain. It has never been your grain. And asking for it, even in a genuine emergency, even when the alternative involves your family starving, carries with it a set of implications about your status and your honour and your permanent relationship with the person being asked that make it more complicated than it sounds. Going to the Lord in need is an admission that your management was wrong, that your stores failed, that you're not capable of providing for your family on the holding he has granted you. It creates a debt, and debts to lords are not like debts to neighbours. Debts to lords accumulate interest in kinds you cannot predict and cannot repay on a timeline you control. Your father knows this. Marjorie knows this. Everyone in Marsh End knows this. Not the granary, you say? No, she agrees. She goes back to feeding her chickens, a dismissal, but not unkindly. You walk back up the lane in the cold, your feet going numb in their rag wrappings, your breath making clouds in the still air, thinking. Your mother has the information by the time you get back. Your father has told her, in that compact, efficient way of parents who communicate entire situations in the time it takes to exchange 3 sentences. She is standing by the hearth, not doing anything, which means she's thinking very hard. The porridge bowl from breakfast is cleaned and put away. Thomas is sitting near the goats, which he does when he needs comfort, leaning against the wicker hurdle with his shoulder blades against the warm animal bulk of them. He's not looking at anyone. He's doing the specific thing children do when they've understood more than the adults think they have. Nan is awake in her corner, sitting up, her back against the wall, her hands folded in her lap with the stillness of someone who has stopped expecting things to move quickly. The Fletcher boy will have stores, your mother says when you come in. At winter prices. She presses her lips together. How much do we have? About 3 shillings. 3 shillings. That's the household money. The money that took months to accumulate through small sales and small labours, a day of work here, a bundle of rushes sold there, the few pennies your mother earned mending cloth for the parson's wife last autumn. 3 shillings is not nothing. 3 shillings is in fact a significant amount of money for a family like yours. It represents actual financial effort. At winter prices for grain, 3 shillings will buy approximately half of what you need to reach March. What else can we sell, you ask? The question sits in the room. The goats. The goats have value, obviously. They produce milk, which is protein, which is survival. But selling a goat in December means losing the milk production for the rest of winter, which is itself a kind of slow starvation. You sell the goat and have money for grain, and then you have grain but no milk. And by March you're not better off, you're just differently worse off. The pig in the lean-to. The pig is actually the most valuable thing the family owns in terms of immediate cash conversion. You could slaughter it, eat part, sell part. But you were planning to slaughter it in February, the traditional time when it's cold enough to keep the meat, and selling it now in winter means selling it at the worst time, when everyone else with sense is holding their animals and the market is thin. Your mother looks at the wall for a moment. The better cloak, she says. Your grandmother makes a small sound. The better cloak is the good wool one, the dark green one that belongs to your mother and that she wears to church on Sundays and on the specific occasions when she needs to look like a person who has a life outside of survival. It is good quality. It was her mother's. It is the single decorative object in this house, the single thing that has value beyond pure function, and selling it would mean selling, essentially, the family's last claim on dignity. "No," your grandmother says from her corner, in the tone of someone who has run out of patience with the conversation. Everyone looks at her. "You'll not sell the cloak," she says. "I've watched 2 famines and 1 plague come through this county, and I'll tell you what sells and what doesn't, and that cloak doesn't sell unless we're burying people." She pauses. "We're not burying people. Not yet." A vote of confidence of sorts. "Then what?" your mother asks. "Then you go to the forest," Nan says, "like we did." This requires explanation. The forest is not yours. This is important, so let me be precise. The forest, specifically Holworth Wood, which begins about 1.5 miles north of the village and runs for several miles in all directions, belongs to Sir Edward. Like most things in the vicinity, the trees are his, the game is his, the undergrowth technically is his. The concept of the forest floor probably belongs to him in some theoretical legal sense that none of you have ever had to test. You have limited rights in it. Gleaning rights, which means you can collect fallen wood, dead wood, and certain other things at certain times, according to custom that everyone understands and nobody has ever quite written down. What you cannot do is fell a living tree, hunt the deer, trap the rabbits, or take anything that hasn't already given up and fallen on its own. In practice, of course, people break these rules constantly because they live next to a forest and it contains food and warmth and they are hungry and cold. And the Lord's foresters, the men employed to patrol the wood and enforce his rights, are 2 people covering several miles of land, and they can't be everywhere, and they know perfectly well what they're looking at when a family looks hungry in December. What Nan means by "go to the forest" is several things at once. It means fallen wood, obviously. Wood you can technically take. It means the searching for things that winter hasn't killed entirely. Roots, bark, certain mosses and fungi that grow through the cold. The particular knowledge of what's edible and what isn't, that she carries in her memory like a second vocabulary, built up across decades of seasons when the normal food supply wasn't quite enough. It also means the possibility of something beyond strict gleaning rights. A rabbit, maybe, if you were lucky and if you were clever and if you didn't get caught. The foresters have to sleep. Your father says nothing about the forest. His silence means, yes, go. His silence also means, if you're caught, I didn't send you. Both things are true and neither of them is dishonest. I'll go, you say. Your mother looks at you for a moment, measuring something she doesn't say. Take Thomas, she says. Take Thomas. 2 of you cover more ground, and he knows the wood better than you think. This is true, probably. Thomas has been disappearing into the edges of Holworth Wood since he was 8 years old, which has always made your parents nervous, and which Thomas has always treated as an entertainment rather than a transgression. He knows where certain things grow. He has the specific knowledge of a child who has spent time in a place without an adult sense of what's forbidden. You look at your brother. He's already unwrapping himself from the goats, trying not to look like he's been hoping for this. Put on everything you have, you tell him. We're going to be out for a while. Let's talk about what you're wearing. This matters more than you might think. You have a linen shirt which has been washed twice since September and is starting to go grey. Over that, a wool tunic, rough woven. The sort of thing that would be scratchy against bare skin, except that your skin is now so conditioned by it that you've stopped feeling the scratch in the same way you've stopped smelling the hut. Over that, a sleeveless jerkin made from leather that has dried to the consistency of something slightly more flexible than wood. Your breeches are wool, held up by points tied to the shirt, and they end at the knee. From the knee to the ankle, wool stockings, darned at the heel so many times that the original wool is now a minority participant in the construction. The rag wrappings over your feet inside your shoes, leather, resoled once, resoled badly, the left one letting in water when the snow is wet, and then your coat, which is the thing standing between you and the actual air. It's heavy wool, undyed almost, the colour of field mud, which is to say a brown that is not quite any particular brown, just the general category of brown that wool becomes when it has been worn and re-washed and worn some more. It has a hood, which is important. It buttons at the front with wooden toggles. You look like a person made entirely of earth. Brown earth, grey wool, the particular colourlessness of everything that isn't dyed because dye costs money. Thomas is wearing a version of the same, slightly smaller, slightly worse because hand-me-downs reach the younger sibling already used. His coat is too short at the wrist. His shoes are your last pair from 2 years ago, and they're too large, stuffed with straw to fit. He doesn't complain. He has never, in his 11 years, complained about shoes. This is the kind of thing you notice about Thomas and love him for, in the specific way you love things about people when you live in very close quarters and have no choice but to know them completely. Ready, you ask? Ready, he says. And you go out into the December morning. The lane is empty. Other families are inside, conserving heat, conserving calories, doing the specific mathematics of winter survival. You pass the Fletcher mill, which is closed today, no grinding, the millstone still. The Miller family lives in the attached house, and you can see candle glow through the window. You do not look at it for long. You pass the church, which is the only stone building in the village proper, squat and cold-looking, its small tower visible above the tree line. The parson will be inside somewhere, probably by his fire, probably reasonably warm, because the parson, whatever his spiritual virtues, has wood and food in sufficient quantities. The church collects its tithe before anyone else eats. You try not to think about the parson's fire. The lane runs north out of the village into fields that are empty and white and flat to the horizon. The sky presses down on them with its particular December personality, which is the personality of something that has simply decided it's finished with warmth and is not interested in reconsidering. The wind comes from the east, off the fens, and it has a quality of sharpness that is different from simple cold. It finds the gaps in your clothing and goes directly for the skin underneath with the focused intention of something that has nothing personal against you, but is going to do this regardless. Thomas walks beside you with his chin tucked down and his hands in his armpits, which is the correct posture. How bad is it, he asks. You look at him. He is 11 years old, watching you with eyes that are already doing their own calculation. I don't know yet, you say, which is honest. Depends on what we find. The barrel was wet when it was filled, he says. I saw father put it in. I didn't say anything. Neither did I, you tell him. A pause. Is that our fault, he asks. You think about this for a moment, because it deserves an honest answer, and Thomas deserves the respect of an honest answer. It's just what happened, you say finally. The harvest was wet because the autumn was wet. The autumn was wet because it rained. It rained because that's what rain does. You pause. We're going to be all right. Thomas nods. He doesn't entirely believe you, but he accepts the performance of confidence the same way you accepted it from your father this morning, because some performances are necessary and everyone involved knows what they are. The tree line of Holworth Wood appears ahead, dark against the pale sky. The wood is different in winter. You've been in it in summer, when it's green and loud with birds and there's something around every corner. Mushrooms and berries and the cool shock of the stream and the sense of the world being alive and abundant in ways that are almost aggressive. Summer in Haworth Wood feels like being inside something that is trying to offer you things constantly, pressing gifts at you from every direction. Winter in Haworth Wood feels like being inside something that has decided to stop. The trees are bare, mostly oak, some ash. The occasional ancient yew near the northern edge that the old people say was there before the Normans came, before the Saxons, before anybody. The bare branches against the sky make a pattern like cracked mud, or like a map of somewhere complicated. The snow is thinner here, under the canopy, but what's on the ground has the particular quality of the undisturbed snow. No tracks except animal ones, and even those are sparse today. Something large moving through yesterday evening. You can see the compressed depression but can't identify it with certainty. Fox, probably. Something about the size and spacing. The silence is enormous. In the village, even in winter, there's always something. The sound of people, animals, work. The axe on the woodpile, someone's child. The particular squeak of the well rope. Here there's nothing but the wind in the high branches and the distant call of a rook, somewhere deep in the wood. Thomas moves differently here. You notice it immediately. He relaxes, his shoulders dropping, his stride changing from the forward-leaning efficiency of someone getting from place to something more lateral, more exploratory. He looks up and sideways and down at the ground. He is, in some fundamental way, at home here. Over there, he says, and goes left, between two large oak trunks. You follow him. He knows where he's going. Fallen wood first, because that's legitimate and because it's cold and the house needs fuel. You gather as you go, picking up fallen branches, testing for dryness by the sound they make when you snap them. A dry crack versus the fibrous tearing of something still wet. The dry wood is lighter. The wet wood is heavier and will burn badly, smoking more than it flames, filling the hut with the particular misery of a fire that isn't quite working. You tie the dry branches into a bundle with a strip of cloth from your coat pocket, carried for this purpose. Thomas finds mushrooms. This is the first real thing, and it's better than you hoped. They're bracket fungi, growing on the north side of a fallen log that Thomas leads you to with the confidence of someone who's been visiting this log regularly for months. Not just one or two, a whole shelf of them, pale grey, fanning out from the rotting wood in overlapping layers. He crouches down in the snow and touches them carefully, the way he would touch something he wasn't sure would stay. Wood ear, he says, and this one here. He points to a smaller cluster, darker, with a different texture. That's velvet shank. Good to eat. You know velvet shank. It's a winter mushroom, one of the few things that will grow in cold, and it's edible and not unpleasant, which puts it in an elite category this time of year. How much, you ask? He looks at the log, the spread of fungi, doing his own calculation. A good amount, he says, enough to matter. You begin harvesting carefully. Not all of it. You know enough to leave some, so it comes back, so next week if you need it, there's something left to find. You wrap what you take in the cloth from your pockets. This is not on its own. A winter's worth of food. Let's not pretend otherwise. Mushrooms are good, but they're mostly water and they don't carry the caloric weight of grain. You could eat this entire harvest and still be hungry by evening. But it's something. It's protein. And protein matters, and it's there. Thomas moves on and you follow him deeper into the wood. The brook, when you reach it, is half frozen. The edges have iced over and the centre still moves black and quick, visible through the gaps in the ice. The bank is thick with dead vegetation, the brown stalks of last summer's water plants pressed down by snow. Thomas crouches at the bank and scrapes the snow away with his bare hands. Under the snow, the bank is soft, dark. The smell of cold mud rises immediately, clean and mineral, the smell of things sleeping rather than dead. He pulls out a root, then another. You look at them. Brownish white, about the length of a finger. You know these. Bulrush rhizomes. They're good all winter, Thomas says. Nan told me about them. This is interesting. Nan, who apparently has been conducting an ongoing informal education with your brother that you weren't fully aware of. While you were working, while you were being useful in the visible, immediate ways that work requires, Nan was sitting by the window on the summer evenings watching Thomas play at the wood's edge and telling him things. You think about this, about the way knowledge passes in a world without books, without schools, about the specific value of an old woman who has survived 2 famines, whose grandmother survived another, who carries in her memory an entire parallel curriculum that exists precisely for moments like this one. You help Thomas dig. Your fingers go numb almost immediately. The mud is cold in a way that bypasses the regular cold of the air and goes straight for the bone, and by the time you've filled one bundle with roots, you can't feel the tips of your fingers and have to stop and curl them against your palms and breathe on them until something comes back. Thomas doesn't stop. His hands are smaller and redder and working faster, and he doesn't complain about the cold either. There's more downstream, he says, about 20 minutes. How often have you been out here? He doesn't answer, keeps digging. You look at your brother, kneeling in the snow by the frozen brook, his nose red, his breath coming in puffs, his hands black with mud, methodically pulling food out of the ground like he's been preparing for exactly this. You've been coming out here all winter, you say. Since October, he says. Does father know? A pause. He hasn't asked. Which is the careful answer of someone who understands the principle of things not said. The same principle your father applied this morning when he didn't say aloud what you should do about the barrel. Everyone in this family's running the same operating system, it turns out. You hear it before you see it. The scrape of something on bark, quick and then still. The specific sound of small weight moving over wood. You've been moving through the wood for about 2 hours by now, and the light has shifted. December light doesn't have much range, moving from the thin, cold brightness of morning to the thinner, cold dimness of mid-afternoon, with barely a pause for anything like noon. The shadows are longer. The rabbit is sitting under a hazel bush, perfectly still, looking at you. You are still too. Beside you, Thomas has gone completely rigid, which he does instinctively, and which speaks well of him. The rabbit is fat for December, which means it's been finding something to eat. Its ears are moving slowly, tracking you, and its nose is going, but it hasn't bolted. It's just sitting there, looking at you with the mild, somewhat philosophically detached expression of a rabbit that hasn't yet decided whether you're a threat. You have no weapon. You have a knife at your belt, which is not useful for rabbits unless you can get very, very close. You have a length of cordage in your pocket, which Thomas tied for some purpose earlier. Thomas is already reaching into his pocket. He pulls out a loop of the cordage, slowly, looks at you. You do not move. This is not your first attempt at a rabbit. You have failed more times than you've succeeded. Rabbits are fast, and they make their decisions about running approximately 4 times faster than a human can make a decision about trying to stop them. The only real technique is patience and luck, and the occasional perfect moment when a rabbit decides that the threat isn't quite worth the energy expenditure of escape. Thomas is moving sideways, very slowly, putting himself slightly behind the hazel bush. The rabbit watches him, watches you, rotates its ears. The cordage loop goes down toward the ground. The rabbit bolts. It goes sideways, not forward, which is the wrong direction for Thomas's setup, and it's under the next bush before either of you have moved, and then it's gone, a brown shape threading through the undergrowth at a speed that makes the whole preceding 30 seconds feel like a waste of time. Thomas stands up, looks at where the rabbit was. Close, he says. Close, you agree. You both stand in the silence of the wood for a moment. Next time, he says. You nod. The thing is, he means it. He's not frustrated. He has the patience of someone who has been coming here all winter, who has failed at rabbits before, who understands that the rabbit is part of the longer game. Thomas, at 11 years old, has already grasped something that takes some people until middle age. That failure is not a verdict. It's just what happened this time. You pick up your bundle of mushrooms and roots in the tied wood. What else, you ask? He thinks. His face, in the pale winter light, goes through a series of small calculations. Hawthorn berries, he says. Over on the far side. They're past peak, but there might be some still on the trees. And I think there's elder, over near the old charcoal platform. Might be some dried berries left. Lead the way, you say. By the time you turn for home, the light is failing in the way that December light fails, quickly, without apology. The sky goes from pale to grey to the first shade of something darker, and you know you have maybe an hour before real dark falls and navigation becomes genuinely difficult. You inventory what you have. The wood, a good bundle, properly dry. Maybe 3 or 4 days of fuel if you're careful. The hut will not be warm exactly, but the fire will continue. The mushrooms, 2 wrapped cloths of bracket fungi and velvet shank, more than you expected. Thomas was right that it was enough to matter. The roots, bulrush rhizomes, frozen stiff by now, which you'll need to thaw and prepare. They can be dried and ground into a kind of flour, actually. Nan knows how to do this, or just boiled directly. Either way, they add substance. The hawthorn berries, not many but present. Bitter without cooking. Fine with cooking or dried. No rabbit. You look at what you're carrying and you think, this helps. This is not enough, but this helps. What you've not solved, the fundamental calorie problem, the barrel's loss, the math that doesn't work out to spring. What you've found, a few more days of not having to make the harder choices. Sometimes a few more days is what you're working toward. Thomas is walking beside you with the quiet satisfaction of someone who has done what they set out to do. There's mud on his hands and knees and a scratch on his cheek from a hazel branch. He looks better than he did this morning, in the way people look better when they've done useful physical work and have something to show for it. Good day, he says. Good day, you agree. And it is. It's a December day in 1631 when everything's going wrong, and you're cold and hungry and the math still doesn't add up. And it was still a good day because you did what you could with what you had. Sometimes that's what a good day means. The village appears through the bare trees, the evening fires lit, the thin smoke rising from the thatch, the sound of someone splitting wood somewhere, a dog barking once at something that turns out to be nothing. Marjorie is in her yard again. She sees what you're carrying and nods once approvingly, in the way of someone who has made the same trip and knows what it means. "Tomorrow I'll go," she says. "Agnes has a bad foot. I'll take the boy." She means her grandson, the oldest of Agnes's three, who is 9, who will be doing the same thing Thomas has been doing, learning the wood, learning the winter, learning the specific curriculum of survival that is the primary education of his life. You nod back. In the hut, your mother and father have not been idle. Your father found 2 things during the day: a cache of dried beans in the bottom of the storage chest that your mother had forgotten about, behind a pile of folded wool from last year's garden, and from Widow Barnes down the lane, in exchange for a promise of 1 day's labour in the spring, half a bag of dried peas. Your mother has spent the day doing what she does with the questionable grain, spreading the least bad of it near the fire, turning it regularly, drying it out as much as possible. She knows it's not perfect. She also knows that eating slightly compromised grain is better than not eating. Some of it's usable, she says when you come in, not as a claim of victory, just as a fact. The ones without the thread in them, if I dry them properly, I'll check each one. This is how it goes. You check each grain. You sit by the fire in the evening, one by one, rolling them between your fingers, checking the weight and feel and looking for the white thread. It's tedious work. It takes hours. Your eyes hurt by the end. But you have grain for maybe 5 more days out of the barrel now instead of 3. Every day counts. After supper, a thin stew, the mushrooms added, the roots chopped in, enough to make something that has actual substance and actual flavour, which feels almost absurd after weeks of plain porridge. The evening settles into the hut. The fire is fed. Not generously, but enough. The orange light fills the room. Thomas falls asleep almost immediately, slumped against the wall by the hearth, his legs tucked up, his face finally unclenching from the cold. He looks asleep, like what he is, a child who's been doing adult things all day, and who now, given permission by darkness and warmth, has simply let go and become young again. Your parents sit together at the table, which is a plank on 2 trestles, which is the furniture, the only furniture, and talk in low voices. You can hear them but not make out the words. They're doing the same calculation you were doing last night in the dark by the barrel, but they're doing it together. You sit with Nan. This is not an unusual evening arrangement. You've sat with Nan many evenings. She's your father's mother, and she came to live with you 3 years ago when her husband, your grandfather, died of a chest sickness that took him in 6 weeks. She was 67 when she moved in, and she's 70 now, and her body has been in steady negotiation with age since at least 63. She is sharp, though, still absolutely sharp. "The roots," she says, when you come and sit by her. "Did you find them by the brook?" "Thomas found them," she nods. "Thomas has been listening. Good." She looks at you with the specific kind of assessment that only very old people can do, which is the look of someone who has seen enough to compare you to what came before. "You found mushrooms too?" "Velvet shank." "Good, good." She's quiet for a moment. Outside, the wind picks up, pressing against the hut walls, finding the gaps in the thatch and making itself known. The fire shivers. Was it like this, you ask, before the famine times? She takes a breath, lets it out slowly. The first one, she says. I was a girl, younger than Thomas, my mother. She stops, starts again. We lost 2 brothers that winter, not from starvation exactly, from what comes after. When you're weak enough, the cold takes you, or the fever. The body has nothing to fight with. The fire pops. Thomas doesn't stir. The second time I was married already. My husband's family. They were on better land than ours, stony but better drained. They came through. We came through. Another pause. Not everyone did. What did you eat? You ask. She looks at her hands in her lap the way she does when she's remembering rather than thinking. Everything, she says. Bark tea, nettle soup, some things I will not name, whatever the forest gave us. She glances at you. The things Thomas knows. I knew them first. I gave them to him because knowledge doesn't weigh anything to carry, and you never know when you'll need to put it down. The wind finds another gap. The flame bends. Are we going to be all right? You ask her directly, because you're the age now where you can ask that question and mean you want the real answer. She looks at you for a long time. You'll have to go to the miller, she says, at winter prices. Yes, at winter prices. Her voice is not unkind, but it leaves no room for argument. You'll have to spend the money and take the price he gives you and be grateful for it. And then in the spring you'll work to rebuild what you spent, and in the summer you'll build again. And if next autumn is dry enough, you'll have a proper harvest and fill the barrel right and seal it properly. You absorb this. And if next autumn is wet again, she smiles. It's a small smile, more tired than amused, but it's there. Then you'll do this again, she says. That's the life, child. This is the life. She gestures at the room. This is not the worst of it. This is just winter. We've all done winter. She pats your hand once, with the roughness of hers against the roughness of yours, and then withdraws it, and goes back to looking at the fire. Later, much later, after your parents have gone to their side of the room and Thomas has been carried to his proper place and the fire has been banked down to its careful minimum, you lie on your back and listen to the hut breathe. It breathes in winter. You've always known this. The wood creaks, the thatch shifts and whispers, the walls expand and contract with the temperature, the mud moving imperceptibly in the cold, the whole structure making its quiet adjustments to survive the night. The goats are moving, small restless movements, the scrape of hooves on the straw. They're cold. You're all cold. The thing about cold at this level, not the sharp cold of stepping outside, but the long cold of a winter night in a hut that is not warm, that is only less cold than outside, is that it becomes ambient, part of the experience of being. You don't so much feel cold as you notice, periodically, that warm is a concept that applies elsewhere. Your feet are numb. Your hands, wrapped in the cloth and tucked under your body, are tolerable. The tip of your nose is something separate from you. You breathe into the blanket. The small warm pocket of breath that forms under the wool is the most luxury available. You stay very still to preserve it. Outside, wind. The snow has started again. You can hear the difference in the sound it makes against the thatch. A fine, dry hiss, like sand. The particular sound of cold snow, not wet snow, which means the temperature has dropped further and the morning will be brutal. You think about the barrel. You think about the miller, Thomas Fletcher, and his winter prices, and the conversation you're going to have tomorrow or the day after. The specific social choreography of it, approaching him at the mill, making the polite small talk that precedes business, watching him assess you and your need, and arrive at a number that both of you know is unfair, and both of you will accept, because the alternative is worse. You'll thank him. He'll be gracious. Both of you will understand exactly what has happened. This is commerce in 1631 Marsh End. Not the elegant commerce of the Royal Exchange, not merchants in silk coats discussing ships, just a boy going to a man who has what he needs and paying what he asks and being grateful for the transaction. You think about spring, about the long stretch between now and when the ground warms again, when the garden starts producing, when the world opens back up from this compressed cold misery it currently is. It's not that far in absolute terms, 4 months maybe, but 4 months in winter is not like 4 months in summer. Summer contains abundance in every direction. Winter contains the specific narrowness of surviving days, plural, until eventually the accumulated days become a month and the months become a season, and the season becomes something else. Thomas snores. You turn onto your side. The fire makes its small sounds cooling. The last light of it is barely visible from here. Just a redness in the darkness, a suggestion of warmth that you might be imagining. Your grandmother's breathing from her corner is slow and liquid. You lie still. This is the part of the story that a normal narrative glosses over, because nothing happens exactly, and something enormous is happening. The days pass. You go to Thomas Fletcher on the third morning. The conversation is exactly as anticipated. He asks what you need. You tell him. He names a price that makes your stomach drop. You negotiate to a price that makes your stomach drop slightly less. You pay it. You carry the grain home. He is not a monster. He is not a villain. He is a man who has grain and needs to make winter prices because his own costs are higher in winter and because the market exists and he participates in it. You shake hands. You thank him. 3 shillings and 4pence. For what cost 2 shillings in autumn? You walk home with the grain and try not to think about the shillings. The grain from Fletcher, combined with the reserves, the dried roots, the mushrooms, which Thomas goes back for twice more, and the careful rationing that your mother runs with the precision of someone who has been doing it her whole life, gets you to Christmas with everyone still eating. At Christmas, the parson gives the traditional feast that the Lord technically provides of the village. This is an ancient obligation, one of the things the Lord owes his people in exchange for the labour and the rent and the tithe and the heriot and all the rest of it. 1 meal, 1 day, a haunch of something, bread, small beer. You eat it in the churchyard under the cold sky, stamping your feet, your breath making clouds. It's the best meal since October. Actual meat, actual bread, the bread white, made from fine ground wheat rather than the rye barley mixture of your daily life. Thomas eats until he looks uncertain. Your father eats slowly with the gravity of a man who is not taking this for granted. Your mother wraps half her portion in cloth and puts it inside her coat. For Nan, who is not well enough today to make the walk to the church. Sir Edward Holworth is visible at the edge of the gathering, a tall man in a good coat surveying his people with the expression of someone fulfilling an obligation. He speaks to the parson. He does not speak to anyone else. He leaves before the food is finished. You watch him go. Feel the specific mixture of things that his presence always produces, resentment and deference and the complicated math of dependence, all running simultaneously. He is not cruel. This is important to understand. He is not a villain. He is simply a man living in a world where his position and yours were assigned at birth, and neither of you has seriously questioned the arrangement, because the arrangement is the world, and questioning the world takes more energy than winter leaves available. The goats keep producing milk, barely, thinly. You stretch it. January arrives with a cold so deep that the inside of the hut is below freezing by morning. You can see your breath when you first wake, and the water in the basin is crusted over, and you break through it with your fist every morning with the same automatic gesture you've made every winter morning since you were old enough to do it yourself. The flour gets thinner. The loaves get denser. Your mother is an expert at the specific art of making bread that tastes like food when the ingredients are barely sufficient for food, and in January she's operating at the very edge of that expertise. There is one bad week. You won't dwell on it at length because it's the kind of week that doesn't benefit from dwelling, but you should know it happened. A week in late January when the supplies have been depleted to a point where what you're eating is technically enough to continue existing, but not enough to stop the hunger. You wake up hungry. You go to bed hungry. The hunger is present and constant, and you stop tasting the food, because hunger is not about taste. Hunger is about the body's specific biological panic at finding itself without sufficient calories and asking relentlessly for more. Thomas gets quiet during this week, quieter than usual. Your father's joints seem worse. He doesn't complain. He moves slower and you notice it, and you say nothing. Your mother reduces her own portions without telling anyone. You find out only because you're watching. Because you've started watching everyone in the way that hunger sharpens you toward the people you're responsible for. You say nothing about what you've noticed. Nan eats what she can and doesn't eat what she can't. She's been doing this long enough to know that her body is not what it was and requires less, or can make do with less, and she is pragmatic about it in the specific way of very old people who have run a long race and have made their peace with its length. You do not eat her portion, even when you're hungry enough to want to. This is a decision you don't even consciously make. It's already made, somewhere below decision. February is the turn. Not because anything changes quickly. Winter does not do anything quickly. But because there's a date that happens in February, which is the point in the calendar where, definitively, that more than half the winter is behind you. More than half. You've been counting. 92 days from November 1st to January 31st. 59 days remain in February and March combined. And February, despite its reputation, is not as bad as January because the light is coming back. Not warmth, not yet, not by a long way, but the light. You can see it factually, objectively in the length of the afternoons. Where December afternoons ended at 4 o'clock and you ate supper in complete darkness, by February you're eating supper in the last light of a pale blue sky, and this is not nothing. Light is not food, but it is mood. And mood, when the mood is everyone in a small hut surviving winter, matters more than you might think. Your mother starts planning the kitchen garden in February. She does this every year, and it is an act of deliberate faith, taking the seed packets from the box under the platform, unwrapping them, feeling the seeds between her fingers, deciding what goes where. Thomas helps her with this, sitting at the table in the afternoons with the seed papers spread between them, his face animated in a way it hasn't been for months. You watch them. Your father, on a mild day in mid-February when the snow has retreated slightly, begins sharpening his tools. He sits outside in the weak sunshine with the whetstone and works through each blade. making the same sounds they always make, the particular rhythm of stone on metal, and your sister-in-law from down the lane, who married into the village 2 years ago, and still sometimes looks at it like it might be temporary, sits on the wall and talks to him while he works, life continuing, people continuing. This is what it looks like. The pig is slaughtered on the 23rd of February on a morning cold enough to keep the meat, but with a slight thaw beginning that makes working outside possible. Your father does it with his good knife, and your neighbour John, who is 6 feet tall and has the specific competence of a man who has done this many times, helping. It's quick. As quick as these things can be, which is to say not quick enough, but quick. Afterward there's work, immediate necessary work. You don't let a pig slaughter slow down, because the cold that keeps the meat is also the cold that makes you want to stop working. Everything has a use. Everything goes somewhere. The cutting up, the salting. The salt is precious, you use it carefully. The bladder, which Thomas inflates and ties off to dry, because it will be useful. The intestines cleaned, which will become sausage casings. The fat rendered down over the fire, your mother and you standing over the pot in the smoke, stirring, the smell tremendous and strange, warm and animal and deeply food. By evening there is bacon and there is fat and there is something that isn't quite sausage but is heading in that direction. And your mother has put portions of fresh meat into the pot and made a proper stew with the February lean vegetables from the root cellar and some dried herbs from the bundle hanging above the hearth. You eat well that evening, really well. Thomas eats in a state approaching rapture. Your father says grace longer than usual. Not performatively. Your father is not a performative man, but with the specific gravity of someone who is genuinely, specifically grateful right now for this particular thing. He names things. The pig, the grain, the roots from the wood, the neighbours who helped, the children. He says your names. You're not expecting that. You look at the table and feel something shift in your chest that isn't quite emotion and isn't quite not emotion. Your mother clears the bowl and serves again. This is also what it looks like. March comes in like March always comes in, which is to say unpredictably and with mixed signals. There are days of actual sun, not warm, not by any reasonable standard, but actual visible sun, the kind that hits the south wall of the hut and makes a warm patch that you can put your hand against and feel something. And there are days of sleet and cold and the specific misery of late winter, which is different from deep winter because you can see the end, and the end is still far away, and that combination is its own kind of suffering. The mud starts. This is the real sign. When the yard turns to mud, when the lane becomes a track of ruts and standing water, when your shoes are perpetually wet and the rag wrappings are perpetually wet, and you stop expecting your feet to be dry until June. The mud is real. The mud is proof. The frozen ground giving way to something that can receive seeds. Your mother starts looking at the kitchen garden with the focused attention she'd been directing at the seed packets. Thomas is spending more time in the wood again, but differently now. Now he's looking for the first things. The dock leaves pushing up through the leaf litter, pale and tender. The wood sorrel, bright green, sharp and clean, in a way that nothing tastes in winter. The first nettles, which are still small enough to handle, and which, boiled with some of the preserved fat from the pig, make something that your body greets as though it's been missing it for months because it has. Vitamin C, though you don't have that word. What you have is the word for what happens without it. Scurvy. The gums softening. The old injuries reopening. The the body slowly dismantling itself from the inside for lack of something it can't name. The spring greens stop it, have always stopped it. The why of this is something centuries away from being understood scientifically, but the what of it has been understood empirically for as long as people have lived through winters in England. Eat the first green things, eat them eagerly, your body knows what to do with them. You eat handfuls of sorrel in the wood and feel something release in your chest that you hadn't known was clenched. March becomes its own kind of surviving, distinct from January's surviving. January was about holding on. March is about the slow restoration of the ability to hold on, the body rebuilding itself from whatever the winter has taken, leaf by leaf. This is the part you don't tell Thomas about, not immediately. Your grandmother does not improve with spring. She's been declining since December in a way you've been watching with the part of your attention that you keep available for watching people you love. The liquid sound in her breathing, the way she eats less each week, not out of calculation but out of diminished appetite. The body in its very old age beginning to lose interest in fueling itself. The increasing time she spends not quite asleep and not quite awake, somewhere in the border territory between the two, her eyes half open and unfocused. The fever comes in mid-March. It's not unexpected. Your mother tells you this quietly one morning while Nan is sleeping, in the voice she uses for facts that need to be stated precisely. An old woman in a cold hut in a hard winter, a chest that has been wet for months. Not unexpected. You sit with her that evening. She's warm in the specific wrong way of fever, which is more than the warmth she needs and all the wrong kind. Her hands, which have always been hard and efficient and dry, are damp. You hold one of them. "You're holding my hand," she says without opening her eyes. "Yes." "I'm not dead yet." "No." A small pause. Her breathing moves through its rhythm. "The roots," she says. "Do you know where the good clumps are? By the second bend in the brook. Thomas showed me." "Good. And the early dock? Not the big leaves. The small ones. They're better. And you know the difference between wood ear and the bad bracket. The bad one is more orange and it... Nan, I'm just telling you. I know." You press her hand. "I know you're just telling me." She's quiet for a while. Outside, somewhere in the new warmth of mid-March, a bird is singing. The first singing, not just a call, but actual song that you've heard since November. A blackbird probably doing the preliminary runs, the warm-up for what comes next. "My mother told me the same things," she says eventually. Her mother told her, all the way back. She opens her eyes. They're not quite focused, looking at something slightly past you. A long line of women who knew where the roots were. You think about that. About the line. About knowledge passed hand to hand across centuries, nothing written, just remembered and given. Nan to Thomas. Nan's mother to Nan. All the way back to whenever the first woman knelt by the first frozen brook in the first hard winter and felt a root give way under her cold hands and thought, "Yes, this. Remember this." "The cloak," she says. "We didn't sell it." "Good." She closes her eye again. "Give it to your mother. She'll need it." A pause. "Don't give it to anyone else. It's not for anyone else." "All right. I'm going to sleep now." "All right." She sleeps. You sit with her for another hour while the house settles into its evening quiet around you. The fire burning properly now. Enough wood, finally. The wood gathering of winter paying off in this. And your parents' voices low and continuous from the other side of the room. And Thomas outside somewhere, doing something in the new twilight. Your grandmother's hand in yours is warm and small and very light. April. By April, the garden is producing. The first radishes, small, sharp, almost violently alive after months of root vegetables and preserved things. The early lettuce, the herbs coming back, the thyme and the sage pushing through the soil with the determination of things that have been there before and know what to do. Your mother plants everything she has. You dig for her, turning the kitchen garden beds with the iron-shod spade that is one of the family's most valuable tools, moving through the dark soil with the ache in your shoulders that you've had since March. And that is slowly becoming the ache of rebuilding, rather than the ache of survival. There is a difference. You're learning to feel the difference. Thomas is everywhere in April, in the wood, in the fields, in the garden, running constant errands between places with the specific energy of an 11-year-old who has been mostly inside for 4 months. He comes back from the wood daily with things, early mushrooms, the good spring kind, bright orange and clean, watercress from the brook, nettles by the armload. Once a pigeon that he somehow knocked from a branch with a well-thrown stone, and that your mother stewed with the last of the winter's dried peas, and that was a very good evening. No rabbit yet. But Thomas says the snare he's set in the wood has signs. You tend the goats, who are louder in spring, more energetic, more insistent about their needs. You milk them morning and evening, and the milk is richer now. The spring grass doing its work. Your father's joints are better in the warmth. He moves more freely. He started on the fence repair that has been waiting since November, working along the boundary of the holding with the methodical patience of someone doing a job that will need doing again in 3 years, and who does it anyway. One morning, at the beginning of April, after breakfast, he stops by the table and picks up one of the seed papers that your mother has left lying out. He looks at it for a moment, then puts it down. Good winter, he says. You look at him. He's not being ironic. He means, we came through. He means, we made it, again, the way we always make it, and that making it is its own category of accomplishment. Good winter, you agree. On a Thursday evening in April, this one, the particular one that always stands out in memory, though not for any obvious reason, you sit outside the hut after supper. This is possible now, possible in April in a way it hasn't been since October. The air is cold still, properly cold, but it's the cold of something warming rather than the cold of something frozen, and the difference is total. The light lasts until almost 8. The sky above the lane is a clear deep blue that you haven't seen since autumn, and there are stars coming out in the east, and the lane is quiet, and from somewhere up toward the Fletcher Mill a dog is doing its evening rounds. Thomas is sitting beside you, his back against the hut wall, eating the heel of the bread that was this evening's supper. He's grown since autumn. You only notice it now, seeing him in the outside light after months of seeing him only in firelight. Something about his face has changed. Some proportion. His legs are longer in his breeches. He's going to be tall. Are you glad? He asks. You look at him. Glad of what? That it's done. He means the winter. You think about it. Not the reflex answer, but the actual question. Yes, you say. Not because it was so bad, though it was in places. Just because it's done. He nods, finishes the bread, looks at the sky. I counted, he says, in winter. I kept count of the days. What for? So I always knew how far we were, how far we had to go. He pauses. 104 days from the first frost to the first radish. 104 days. You sit with that for a moment. the specific arithmetic of what you've just come through. 104 days which your family and your neighbours have endured in versions of this same story for, as far as you can trace, as far back as there are people on this land. Nan said, Thomas begins, and then stops. You wait. She said her grandmother remembered a winter that was 130 days. 130 days. You don't say anything. The evening bird is singing somewhere, the blackbird, doing its full voice now, the elaborate conversational spiralling of it, and the sound fills the lane with something that is almost embarrassingly beautiful against the plain mud and thatch and quietness of everything else. 130 days. And they came through that too, the line of women who knew where the roots were. Your mother is wearing it now, the good cloak, the dark green one, the fine wool, the one that has passed through enough winters to have acquired a particular smell, lanolin and cedar and something older than either, and that fits your mother the way it fit your grandmother, because both of them are small and straight-backed and accustomed to carrying themselves in a way that makes even rough wool look like something deliberate. She's wearing it to church on a Sunday in mid-April, the first mild Sunday. The first Sunday when going to church doesn't involve the specific hardship of cold that makes the whole proceeding feel like penance, in the most literal possible sense. She's walking beside your father, slightly ahead of you and Thomas, through the lane toward the church in the morning light. She doesn't know you're watching her. She adjusts the cloak at the shoulder, a small automatic gesture, the way you adjust things you've always worn. And for just a moment, in the morning light, in the green cloak, she looks like the woman in the story your grandmother told you last December. The long line. The women who knew things. Thomas nudges your arm. Pigeon, he whispers. He means the snare. He means he found something this morning. You look at him. He's barely suppressing a grin because Thomas has the very specific pleasure of someone who has been patient about something and is now getting to be right about it. Tonight, he says. Tonight, you agree. That evening, after the pigeon, roasted this time with the last of the winter herbs, in the actual spring light from the actual open door, because you can open the door in April, you can breathe actual air without it costing you temperature. After supper, after Thomas is asleep with the particular completeness of someone who has done real physical work in mild weather, and is using sleep as pure maintenance, after your parents have retired, after the fire has been banked down. You lie on your back and listen. The hut is different in spring. It breathes differently. Not the tense, contracted breathing of winter, when every gap and crack is a threat, and the walls press in against the cold trying to get through them. Now it breathes loosely, the door slightly open, the single window opened for the first time since October, letting in the night air, which is cold still, properly cold, but alive in a way winter air isn't. Alive with the smell of thawing earth and new grass, and somewhere nearby the brook moving faster with snowmelt. The animals are outside now, the goats in the pen that your father repaired in March. The yard without them is quieter. The hut without them is less warm, but also less sharp with their specific presence. And you've discovered something about yourself, which is that you are profoundly happy about this. Frogs, somewhere along the brook, the specific spring sound of them, a chorus that starts and starts again, irregular, self-interrupting, nothing like birdsong in its formality, but just as unmistakable. Stars through the open window. Not all of them, the cloud cover in the south, but a clean patch of sky to the north showing the plough in exactly the configuration you've known since childhood, exactly as it was last spring and the spring before and every spring that anyone has ever seen from this particular spot in this particular lane in the English Midlands. You think, 104 days, done. You think about the barrel in the corner. It's empty now. Will need filling in autumn. Will need to be properly dry, properly sealed, checked in November, checked again. The same work, the same calculation, the same arithmetic that runs under everything always. You think about Nan. You don't let yourself dwell. She is there. She got through. The fever broke in late March, slowly over several days, like ice melting, not suddenly but gradually, the warmth coming down, the breathing clearing, and one morning in the first week of April you came in, and she was sitting up in her corner with her hands folded in her lap, and her eyes sharp and clear, and she said, without preamble, "Is there bread?" There was bread. She ate 2 pieces. The line continues. You lie still and listen to the frogs and feel the particular exhaustion of a body that has been working very hard for a very long time and is now, cautiously, beginning to believe it can afford to rest. Your feet are warm tonight. Both of them. Even the left one. Let it come. The sleep. The particular spring sleep of the body that has finished a long job and is beginning the process of remembering what it's like to have enough. Outside, the blackbird is still at it. These birds sing at night in April, which you've always known and always found remarkable. The way they simply don't stop when the light goes. Just keep going into the dark with the same elaborate, careful music. The hut is quiet around you. Your parents breathing slow and even. Thomas breathing the way he always breathes, deeply, completely, giving himself entirely to sleep the way he gives himself to everything. Nan in her corner breathing more quietly than before, but there, still there. The barrel is empty. The barrel will be filled again. 104 days, and the day after them, and the day after that, and April, and the blackbird. Let it slow. The sounds of the village moving through the night outside, someone's dog, the distant sound of the brook, wind mild now, not the enemy wind of December, just wind. The creak of the hut making its small adjustments. Your hands remember the cold of the brook, the feel of root mud under your fingernails. Your feet remember the rag wrappings. Your stomach remembers the thin porridge, and the thick stew, and the pigeon tonight, and all the gradations between. Your body has been doing arithmetic all winter. Let it stop now. The stars in the window are moving, not quickly, but moving. The slow wheel of them that has nothing to do with any of this, that has been happening above every winter anyone has ever survived, that will continue above every winter anyone ever will survive. The frogs, the blackbird, Thomas's breathing, the warmth in your feet. Let it go. Centuries will pass. The hut you're in, this specific hut, these specific walls of mud and straw that have absorbed 400 years of smoke and breath and argument and prayer, the hut won't survive them. It will fall. The thatch will go first, the mud will follow, and the whole structure will return to the field it was made from, and eventually someone will build something else on the spot, and then something else after that. The lane will stay. The lane stays for a very long time. The brook will stay, roughly, moving slightly the way brooks do, adjusting its path over the centuries, but staying within the same general band of the landscape, still running past the spot where the bulrush roots grow in winter. The wood will be cut down mostly, the great oaks sold off in some century you won't see, then partially regrown, then partially cut again. What remains will be different from Holworth Wood, but it will be a wood. The church will stay. The stone will outlast everything else. But the people will keep coming. Different people, different names, different problems, different winters. But people in huts, and then people in houses, and then people in buildings of various sizes and descriptions, all of them doing the same thing in December, which is looking at what they have, looking at what they need, looking at the distance between the two, and beginning the long, careful work of closing it. Some things don't change. The arithmetic doesn't change. The body's need for warmth and food and the company of people it loves doesn't change. The specific quality of a December night in the English Midlands doesn't change very much. And the knowledge passed hand to hand, generation to generation, whispered at window sills and shown at frozen brook banks, the knowledge travels forward. Your grandmother told Thomas where the roots were. Thomas will tell someone. The line continues. You are warm enough, fed enough, safe enough. You have a roof, imperfect, leaking in 7 places, and work that will matter tomorrow, and people sleeping around you who are going to be here in the morning. That is, in the terms of 1631 Marsh End in the English Midlands, a great deal. That is, if you think about it from this particular vantage point, everything. Let the frogs go. Let the blackbird go. Let the arithmetic go quiet. Tomorrow the garden will need water. Tomorrow the goats will need milking. Tomorrow there is the fence in the upper field and the seeds that need covering, and the 10,000 small tasks of a world that is alive and beginning again. But that's tomorrow. Tonight is just this. The straw under you, which is not soft but is familiar. The blanket over you, which is not thick but is enough. The small sounds of a hut that is breathing itself through another night the way it has done every night of your life and every night before you were born and will do in some form for a long time yet. Your mother's cloak dark green hanging on the peg by the door. Thomas breathing, Nan breathing, the frogs, the spring stars. Let them carry you down through the tiredness and into the warmth underneath it, the deep warmth that has been waiting for you since November, since the first frost, since the first morning you woke up cold and counted the days, 104 of them, done. Rest now. You've earned it. Take it. Let the sounds of April carry you to wherever sleep goes, which is somewhere warm and dark and free of arithmetic, where the barrel is always full, and the winter is always just over, and the bread is white and thick, and there is more. There is always more in dreams. Good night.